Sounds good.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's session. We have a really great guest here today. First, I would love to introduce Talent Collective in case those of you who are here don't know what Talent Collective is. We are a community for women in the recruiting place. So we put on a lot of virtual sessions like workshops and webinars, specifically with the purpose of professional development for people in recruiting, which also touches HR, of course. And we also have a really great mentorship program and peer mastermind groups. My name is Krista. I'm one of the co-founders with Talent Collective. So really nice to meet you all and have you all here. Today's session, though, is going to be all about how to choose the right HR software or tools. Obviously, that includes talent acquisition tools. And we have someone so amazing here to help guide us through this conversation. And I've actually used select software reviews before for myself, for one of my clients. And I can just attest to what a great service it is. But essentially, this session is all going to be about how do you go about vetting tools and resources that you're bringing onto your team. It's just such an overwhelming thing to think about, how many tools are out there. I mean, that's the first thing, is just the overwhelm of how many tools are out there. But then how do you organize yourself? What are the right questions you're asking? Making sure that you're covering all the things that you're going to need. So we're going to talk to Phil today about that. But in the meantime, I'll let him introduce himself in just a quick second. In the meantime, would love for all of you to be able to introduce yourselves. So feel free to use the chat for that. You can put your name, where you're calling in from, your LinkedIn profile. We always love using these sessions as kind of a little bit of a networking session as well. That's a big goal of Talent Collectives as well, is to connect women and men in the recruiting space. So feel free to introduce yourselves. Also use the chat as Q&A. So I'm going to be asking Phil a lot of questions, but things get a lot more interesting when we have real questions from our audience, real things that you guys need solutions to. So please put those in. I'll keep an eye on the chat, and we'll bring those in as they're in there. And then last but not least, we are recording this session. We will send it out. So if you have to hop off a little early, or you just want to go back and refer to things, we will, after the session, send out an email that has the recording as well as Phil's LinkedIn, so you can connect with him. And then anything else, I think we have a little bit of a promo. So if you book a demo, you'll get, I think it's a $50 gift card. So with that, I want to introduce Phil, who is the founder and head of people at Select Software Reviews. He's also a dad to two little cute toddlers. And he's got a lot of other really big claim to fame. He's been a head of people and a fractional HR consultant for many years. He's also helped teams scale from 300 to over 3,000 employees in 14 months. So really amazing background. But I'll pass it over to Phil, and he can introduce himself a little bit further and talk a little bit about Select Software Reviews.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. I think that was a good background. Been in the HR world for well over a decade, worked as a fractional professional and bought a lot of tools, did some of it the right way, some of it the wrong way, made a lot of mistakes. And basically, I started this blog to help people figure out what HR software to buy. And now around 100,000 people a month go to this blog to read our reviews about applicant tracking systems. And then we have this team of people that you can actually just talk to for free. We call them our advisors. And if you want to, get a new ATS, or you're looking at switching from spreadsheets to an HCM, or whatever the case may be, you can just talk to those people and they'll give you recommendations and advice. And actually, we're also adding a new category, which we haven't done historically, which is AI recruiting and AI sourcing tools. That's going to be launching extremely soon too. So yeah, that's basically my background. I've got my MBA, sort of a finance nerd, so I skew heavily on the business case, return on investment type stuff when it comes to getting internal stakeholder buy-in and all that jazz. But just want to hopefully share some tips and tricks learned from buying a lot of tools over time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and thanks for mentioning that. I know a lot of people on the call probably are from talent acquisition, but I'm sure we have people from HR. And I think a lot of these tips and tricks that you're going to share can apply to other tools outside of just recruiting in HR as well. And I personally used SSR when I was vetting a new ATS for one client that I was working with. So, yeah, let's dive into some questions here. So, I would love to hear from you what your perspective is on how the HR and recruiting tech landscape has changed over the past few years. You're not allowed to talk about AI, just kidding. I'm sure AI is a part of it. So tell us what your thoughts are. How's the landscape really changed over the last couple of years?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think that it's probably changed like a little bit less than I would have expected 10 years ago. In
Mm,
that, we sort of have this like same core system, the applicant tracking system, and some people have standalone ATS, and some people have it as part of a what I call an HCM or an all-in-one solution. And on top of that, that's probably where a lot of the innovation has happened is within that system of record, having more automations, having more kind of taking manual processes and streamlining them and building out more and more integrations. And then the integrations part is where a lot of the innovation has happened as well, where we have all these like point solutions that are doing sourcing and screening and offer letters and better employer branding and you kind of name it. But I think what's um yeah a bedrock of my answer here is a conversation I had with the CEO of Greenhouse probably like 6 or 9 months ago. And we were at Transform, the big show in Las Vegas, and we were sort of looking out over the many vendors out there. And I was like, what do you think about like an AI first applicant tracking system and that potential to disrupt your business? And of course, this is a bias of his, but I sort of share this viewpoint where they've spent the last like 15 years building like a really feature rich applicant tracking system that takes care of all these different edge cases and has amazing integrations across hundreds of different tools. And I think like the core of Greenhouse or any applicant tracking system in 2010 is probably like quite similar to what it is today. And then you're layering on how do we just make people more efficient? How do we make this easier to use, especially outside of the recruiting teams?
mhm.
So
What do you, I'm just curious, do you think big companies like that will start to buy other, like some of those point solutions and then like essentially make it part of their own tool?
yeah,
Yeah.
some of them, for sure. And a lot of the applicant tracking systems have bought some of these point solutions. Like sourcing was a big thing where I think Lever was the first company to have like a native sourcing technology, and then Greenhouse made an acquisition, and some of the other ones tried to like buy or build other solutions. Workday just bought Paradox, which is effectively it's a chat bot that is used especially for high volume recruiting for like a McDonald's or something like that. And there was actually some M&A today as well, where Humanly, which is an AI recruiting tool, bought Qualified and two other companies. So Qualified's like a screening tool for coders. I think one of the other solutions that they bought was for people working in restaurants specifically. And so you're seeing a lot of this happening for sure. But I think what's also cool about these companies is that there's just so much you can innovate on as an applicant tracking system and like make things easier for your core audience. And then you can partner with other organizations. So Pinpoint's another company that I'm talking to the CEO recently, and their strategy now is to basically have almost like a marketplace within Pinpoint. So like if you need like a background check, you don't have to like go to some third party and like figure out how to do the background checks, whatever. You just like click a button and it's like, okay, we're doing a background check on this person that we're looking to hire. Um, so I think that's like a really strong strategy of just like partnering with the best in class third party tools.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, amazing. So I've seen some like graphics of just like what are all the different tools and all the different areas that you could want or use them, and it's just hundreds, I mean hundreds, maybe even thousands of different tools out there. It's
Yeah.
overwhelming. um what do you recommend for someone who's trying to kind of quickly identify what type of HR tools actually matter for their stage of growth?
It's so complicated and it's so hard to stay on top of this marketplace because, well, the kind of core of it hasn't changed. Like literally every single day, there's acquisitions, there's people launching new features. Some of those features are vaporware, some of them are real. Um, and so like that's really why we exist as a business, to be honest with you. And so like my honest advice first and foremost would be to talk to one of our HR software advisors because they'll be able to look at your company and say, okay, you're at a nonprofit, you're at a big company, you're at a small company, you've got 1099s, there's all these different permutations of stuff that gets you to here are the 2 to 5 companies that you should look at. And here's how you think about pricing and everything else. And so I'll drop a link in the chat here if anybody is thinking about like we're trying to get an eight all-in-one HCM, we're looking at an ATS, we're moving from spreadsheets to a system, whatever. Book a time with one of those people, and definitely leverage their advice. And as we mentioned earlier, there's actually a promotion that we're running for Talent Collective where if you use them to buy software, we'll give you a $50 gift card. So that's like a nice incentive as well. But that would really be, my advice first and foremost is to leverage that because there's just so much information out there. And I've seen the same infographics where it's like, here are like the 7,000 logos. And you're like, great. Like, and even it's like, all right, I'm going to zoom into like applicant tracking systems. And it's like, oh, good, there's only 49,
Yes.
where do I start? And the reality is like, I mentioned Greenhouse. Greenhouse is a great solution if you're like a mid-enterprise and above and you want to pay up. But like if you're a smaller business or you want to get the cheapest thing that just kind of gets the job done, or that's a terrible solution. We were talking to a 100,000 employee company a few weeks ago, and they've got 3 finalists for their applicant tracking systems. One of those vendors, the biggest customer they have is probably about 1,000 employees. And so, like, if this 100,000 person company bought this solution, it would be a disaster.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And the vendor, of course, they're like, oh, yeah, we can do this. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
they're willing to take a shot because that's probably $1 million a year contract.
Right.
And it's like, oh, we'll figure it out. Maybe this is like us getting into the enterprise, but it's like, if you're that company, you should definitely not partner with that vendor.
Right.
And by the way, that vendor is amazing for smaller companies.
Yeah.
Like we recommend that vendor all the time for like your 50 or 100, 500 employee companies. Like that's an amazing vendor to go with. Your 100,000, it's one of the worst ones.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you make such a good point. And one other thing I've heard a lot is a lot of companies, especially if they are an enterprise level company, maybe their ATS is coming up for renewal in like 2 or 3 years. Like they're starting to vet those tools now.
Yeah.
And then in 2 or 3 years, so much changes between, all of the things that they've rolled out in those next 2 to 3 years. So it can be just complicating from a timing perspective too, and how much technology is changing over that like vetting period. You mentioned something a second ago about vaporware, and I've actually never heard that. But I think it maybe ties into this next question that I have for you, about like what's more hype than substance.
Mm.
So, what are some of those red flags that signal that a platform might be more hype and less substance?
Yeah, and I think for better or worse, like a lot of the AI stuff now is a little hypey, and
Mhm.
that's because like it can do some really cool stuff, but when it gets down to like brass tacks, like I had a friend text me the other day, and it's like these AI solutions are so good at getting to like 95% of the problem, but the last 5%, it's impossible.
Yeah.
And so, for example, there's a host of solutions now that will do like your phone screens for you, and it's an AI voice, and they're doing the full interview. And I actually just saw one last week that I think might be good. I need to do a full demo of it, but the ones that I've used for the most part, they they can ask a couple of questions. The demo itself is great, but if you're like, can I play with it? Very, very quickly, you can see where it would fall apart.
Mhm.
And so I think from my perspective, what I'm always trying to do is like a little bit take control of the demo situation. Like if you're on the phone with a vendor and they're walking you through a presentation or a demo of the product, you want to start asking questions that kind of derails the conversation to something that you care about. And it's like, okay, like here's our specific use case for like Paradox is an example where it works. They just got bought for $2 billion by Workday. They're used by huge enterprise customers. But let's say you're evaluating a chatbot on your career website and the sales rep is like, see, like I can ask it like what are the open jobs, and it gives me a list. It's like, okay, cool. Like, can we ask it, what are the sales roles that you have in the Boston office? Can we ask it how much do these roles pay? What are your benefits packages? How do I apply for jobs? Like all these things, and like that a candidate's probably going to ask it, and that's not in the demo track. But if you go down that rabbit hole and it works, then it's like, oh, this is amazing. And if you go down that rabbit hole and it says, what's Boston, or we don't believe in sales, or whatever, like some crazy answer, it's like, all right, cool. Like this is a good demo, but probably vaporware.
Yeah. I'm laughing because we just had something similar happen. We use like a community platform for talent collective, and we just upgraded our like subscription with them to get the like AI chatbot. And it basically is like you have to pre-program in, and there's only 5 questions you can pre-program in. So I feel like it
Yeah,
was a little like smoke and mirrors. I was like, this isn't worth this. Like, what is this? Like, it's not even that like sophisticated, right? And
yeah.
here we are paying all this extra money for it. So we could have done a better job to ask better questions up front, I think.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, buying software is so hard, and like the only way to really learn how to do it is to get reps and talk to other people who have done it. Maybe you tune in a conversation like this, you're sort of passively learning. Maybe you go out to lunch with the CMO who just bought a new marketing automation platform, the VP of sales that just bought a new CRM, whatever, and you're like, how did you vet it? How long before your contract date? To your point, like you probably don't want to be looking at ATSs if you have a contract that renews in 2027.
Right.
It's gonna spin your wheels a lot. So there's just like all these mistakes, and unfortunately, they can cost a lot of time and money if you fall into these pitfalls.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I think one of the first steps is identifying exactly what you need, right? But once you have identified that, like what next? It's time to go out there and start shopping around. And are there any like frameworks or scoring systems that you recommend when you're trying to objectively compare different vendors?
Yeah. So, and by the way, like I think sometimes as you start researching, you start to really learn what you need. So,
Mhm.
for example, let's say you were like, hey, we need a new ATS, and you talk to Greenhouse, Pinpoint, and Bamboo. And on the Bamboo demo, you were like, gee whiz, like it's really nice to have this all in one. Because that's a ATS, HRIS, performance, like everything, right? Just kind of like boom, right? All in one. And so you actually can learn throughout that process, obviously. What I would recommend is a spreadsheet where on the left side, you've got all your criteria that you care about, and each column is a vendor. So you're gonna have like certain criteria, and throughout the demos, you're just gonna write down like, okay, like does it have a career site builder? Yes or no? Am I able to use change things on the career site without talking to marketing? Yes or no? Does it have like this type of reporting? Yes or no? And maybe some context around like kind of, but we need to build our own report.
Mhm.
One of the smartest people, because I'm always learning about this stuff from other people that I've come across that did this. They basically took that spreadsheet and then they sent it to each of the vendors. And what they did was they blacked out their notes for the other vendors. So let's say you're sending it to Bamboo, you black out your Greenhouse and your Pinpoint notes, but you leave the vendor names.
Mm.
And the reason you do that is because you want the Bamboo rep to know that you're talking to Greenhouse and Pinpoint because they're like, oh wow, like, this is competitive. I need to put my best foot forward on pricing.
Mm,
And also, this is a serious buyer. They're doing their homework.
mm,
It's kind of like buying a car, unfortunately. Like buying a car is such like a horrible
yeah.
experience for the most part. But if you walk into the dealership and one, you control the conversation, you take them out of like their talk track and dig into the things that you care about. Maybe it's the third seat, maybe it's whatever. You let them know, hey, we're looking at the RAV4, but we're also looking at a CRV. You're gonna just get treated with a different level of, I think, respect, and that translates into price.
Yeah, that's such a good recommendation, and being really transparent in that way. And yeah, I mean, anyone that's gonna like create a whole spreadsheet and have like a rating system is a real buyer, right? So why wouldn't they want to come in with their most competitive pricing? I think that's great. What about, you mentioned a couple of times like the all-in-one solutions versus more of these like best of breed point solutions. When do you think it makes sense to prioritize one over the other?
I think you should be looking at the all-in-ones until you probably are hitting like 300 or 400 employees. So,
Mm,
like basically like it's all about scale and it's also, you need the folks on your team to run these effectively. If you're a TA person of one, you probably don't want 7 tools.
yeah.
Um, so the all-in-ones are amazing because like they just make life so much easier. The ATS within an all-in-one is never going to be as good as a point solution. The performance management is never going to be as good. And so that's really the trade-off. And when you get to the point where your organization has figured out, like, look, the thing that really matters for us is sourcing.
Mhm,
And so we need to have like a rock solid sourcing module that is targeted towards like this demographic that we care about, nurses or software engineers or whatever. Or maybe like we're so big on culture fit. And
mhm,
so we want to have that point solution, best of breed, predictive index or whatever your drug of choice is there. Same thing with the applicant tracking system. And that's something that you would directly replace out of these all-in-ones. But if you've gotten to the point where you have a team of recruiters and TA is like really, really important to your organization, then yeah, you're probably going to want to buy one of these point solutions.
mhm. Yeah, I like that. You gave kind of a employee headcount amount where it's like kind of makes sense to really start drilling down into individual solutions rather than, kind of an all-in-one. So that's also very helpful. Um, we talked about this a little bit a few minutes ago, but wondering if you have additional thoughts. So there's so much out there in AI right now, and a lot that probably over promises and looks amazing on the outside, but once you get down to it, doesn't really deliver ROI. So, how do you recommend that people avoid being dazzled by like a flashy AI tool that doesn't really deliver that ROI?
I think it's all about just tempering your excitement in general. And for me, like I have shiny object syndrome. And like without a doubt, when I see something, I'm like, oh my God, like my eyes go wide and I'm like, tell me more. But because I've recognized that, I also like when I feel that in myself, I'm like, all right, it's time to become more of a skeptic and really think about like, okay, how does this work? Is this something flashy? Let's drill into my use case, or let's throw a wrench at this thing and see how it handles it. And what's the value here to my team? Is this like a really cool thing? I don't know if it's like you can reformat your job post or something, and it's like, well, we don't really need that, Um, but if it's like, oh, like it can give us like it can plug into our ATS and automatically build reports that we've been trying for a really long time to build through natural language, and I can like type in the thing on the demo that I want it to build and it actually builds it the way that I want to. And it's like, oh wow, that would save us like 7 hours a month, then there's a lot of value there.
Yeah, that time saved really translates to ROI. What about, like, sometimes the person who's doing the vetting of tools might not be the end user or might be one of many of the end users, right? So
Mhm.
how do you recommend, like, maybe somebody in recruiting ops or HR ops who isn't going to even be using this tool, or maybe you have a much larger team, you are going to use it and you have your ideas for what would be really beneficial. But how do you recommend that teams pull in, some of the other end users into um, deciding and defining what really matters most in a vendor or a tool?
Yeah. And by the way, I'm loving this like combo between Amy and Paul in the comments because we're actually and Amy's basically like, ChatGPT is a great way to like create comparison charts, and Paul's, saying it can create a scorecard. You can feed it your notes, which is like a great idea. Um, we're building like our own LLM based on a lot of proprietary data because like every month we're helping hundreds of HR professionals find and buy the right software. And so like we can basically like aggregate when we talk to them, it's like, what are you using? Why do you hate it? Why is
Huh?
it bad?
Oh,
So like we have all that data that like doesn't exist anywhere else on the internet. And then we
wow.
have the data of like, what did you go with and why? And then 6 months later, when you implemented it, like, did it actually do the things? And so we just have like all this proprietary data that we're putting into like a GPT that will hopefully be ready like in a month for people. But any other ways that people are using GPT, please let me know because like it's also going to build comparison charts. It's going to build ROI analyses. It'll do some basic like contract review. It'll have like a pricing data set. So like you can be like, hey, we got this price from Rippling. Like, is this a good price?
Mhm.
Um, so any other ways that people are using it, like please let me know because we're trying to figure out like one, do people actually want this or are they just going to use ChatGPT because they're like, why am I using this like HR tech thing?
Mm.
Um, and then how you're using it. But sorry to derail.
Yeah, that's
But
great.
just enjoying the combo there. So yeah, like how do you get other people in the organization to get in on this? I think what's really interesting about HR and recruiting is everybody kind of cares about it. Like, your head of sales cares because like, well, I can't hit my quota unless I have the right people, and that's kind of true across the board. People care about culture a lot. Like that's a lot why a lot of people become like managers. They care about mentoring, learning development. And so whatever your initiative is, what I found to be super effective is you basically are like, hey, everybody in the company, like the talent acquisition team is going to find a new candidate assessment tool that will better align candidates who are a culture fit for our organization. Or, the HR team is going to develop a new or buy a new performance management system that allows us to better align what people are working on with company goals and compensation, or whatever your initiative is. And if you'd like to, help us ideate or be along for the journey, please let us know. And you kind of are always pleasantly surprised by the 2 or 3 people that raise their hand. It's like, I'm also, super into like performance management and we did it really well at our past company, or I have ideas on it, whatever. And those people kind of become like a board of directors as you go and buy software.
Mm.
And they're not going to like go on all the demos. They're not going to like, be in the trenches. And that's actually a good thing. Like you don't want them kind of stealing the show from you, but they can give you ideas. They
Yeah.
can give you the juice when you need to go to the CFO and say, hey, we're buying, Lattice and it's going to be $50,000 a year. And the CFO, has a heart attack. And then you're like, but like these 4 people are like on the bench, on this project. And they're like, oh, really? Okay, because those people who are taking on this extra work and really care, like they're usually the people who are like very respected in the organization to begin with.
Mhm.
So that's a really good way to do it. Obviously, when you start a procurement cycle, asking IT for a checklist, asking the CFO office for a checklist, other key stakeholders is not a bad idea.
Mhm.
Bringing along people for late stage demos, like, hey, we're between these 2 solutions. Would love to get a recruiter in here to understand how you're going to use it day to day. would love to get a hiring manager, would love to get, somebody from the infosec team, whatever it is, to be a part of the final vetting and weigh in, I think is a great way to do it.
Mhm. Yeah, and even if you have, so sometimes you're changing tools and then other times you're buying something new. So if you are changing tools, really understanding those end users and what they have enjoyed and what are those key features that, like, if those were to go bye-bye, they couldn't do their jobs, and then what are the ones that are missing, right? So hopefully you can try to keep what's going well, but then add to when something isn't going as well.
Yeah, exactly. And thanks for the encouragement, Paul. And please make a custom GPT for picking software. That's like literally what I was playing with this morning. We're basically the biggest thing we want to make sure we get right is like anonymizing data, and making sure it's not hallucinating. Like there's like a core database and like the information's accurate and whatever. But I think we'll have a alpha soon, and we'll have a V1 that you can actually like use, and will be, I hope, much better than ChatGPT just based on the data set that we have pretty soon. So thank you for the encouragement.
Yeah, you'll have to send it out. I mean, it sounds amazing. I'm also curious on, like, you mentioned people getting quotes, right? And the pricing information. Like, at what point does that become old, right? Like, how do you know if they're changing their pricing? Like,
Yeah,
so maybe there's like a time frame that you put it on, like any quotes within the last 6 months are included, but like past that,
yeah.
it's old information, right?
It's a really good point. Yeah. And you need like the right velocity of data. Um, but hopefully the having that data will allow us to get more velocity because it's like, hey, if you have the best pricing data, I want to cross-reference that and I'm willing to share my data in order to figure out if I have a good quote. So
Mhm.
hopefully that gets us more data. But yeah, like something from 3 years ago, it's like not not super useful, I don't think.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. I appreciate also people putting their LinkedIn's and doing intros in the chat. Even if you haven't done that yet, feel free to continue that. We always love using these sessions as kind of like a mini networking and saying hello to each other. Also, feel free to put questions in the chat for Phil. This is really your opportunity to get any questions answered directly from him. I do have a few more that, of course, I'll keep going on, but if you have one, please put it in the chat and we'd be more than happy to answer it. So let's go into when you're meeting with an HR tech company, what are some common like sales tricks or maybe something that might be like a misleading claim that you should watch out for from whoever's doing the demo?
Yeah. Basically everything somebody would say, do you want a demo could be misleading. I think it's hard to lie about facts, and I don't want to paint it like, oh, all HR tech salespeople are like out to get you and like out to like sell you something terrible for the most amount of money. But I think people respond to incentives, and their incentive is to like sell you something so they can hit their number and get their bonus. But it's super hard. So to say that, like, here's an example of what I like to say is like buy software like a toddler. So just always ask like why. So an example, I helped a company when I was doing fractional buy this new source of talent, and their tagline was we're your best source of hire. And I was like, oh, like, what does that mean? What is the best source of hire? Like, what is it? It's like, oh, we're the highest quality. Okay, what does that mean? Does that mean you interview at a higher rate? You get hired at a higher rate, you're better employees, whatever. And it's like, oh, these people get hired at a higher rate. Oh, okay. So how do you know that? And what do you mean higher rate? Is it like, 20% versus 10%? Like, what's the baseline data? Is this for like certain types of roles? Whatever. Like, there's just like a million things you can drill into here. And unfortunately, at the end of this series of questions, it was basically like the answer was somebody one time in a meeting had offhandedly mentioned one of their customers, like, oh, you guys are our best source of hire. And that became like the company's tagline.
Mm,
And what their entire sales pitch was around, like, we're the number one, and here's why, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh, you don't actually have any information about that. Okay, that's pretty bad, right? Like, we don't want to probably spend a lot of money on this vendor.
Mm,
So I think for me, like I'm just always trying to figure out what are the concrete answers to questions because it's really easy to say, that's on the roadmap.
mhm,
Oh, that's a great idea. I'm gonna send that to my product team. Um, we do have an integration. Okay, what does integration mean? Does that mean like I can download a CSV and upload a CSV? Does that mean like it's an API integration? Do I click a button? Like how to like show me how it works.
yeah.
Um, and I think you just want to do it in a way that like gets to the answer and is like very, respectful because a lot of salespeople, unfortunately, like a lot of people treat them terribly.
Mhm,
And that's just like what they're used to. They're used to people like not showing up for demos, not responding to emails, being annoying on sales calls, and like, basically treating salespeople terribly because they know like they'll just keep, popping up and being like, hey, I'll be helpful because I need to make this commission. And I find that like when you treat them really well and respectfully, you get a lot back in return.
mhm. Yeah, Amy's mentioning in the chat here about, you can have all the features in the world and the company sells it well, but then what's the ease of implementation and adoption, right? So
Yep.
and like the customer support, like Christy mentioned. So anything you can mention or talk about there?
Yeah. Um, it's really important. And one of the red flags is like how do you get the support over time? So a lot of vendors, unfortunately, it's like, oh yeah, you have phone support, and our average time to pick up is like 2 minutes, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like in the contract, it's like, yeah, you get that for like 4 hours a year. And then if you go beyond that 4 hours, you're paying $300 an hour, right? Or you like upgrade to the next tier or whatever the case may be. And so really digging into again like the cold hard facts around like what's the fine print around the customer support. Do I get a dedicated person? What happens if I don't like that person? Can I meet that person before I sign the contract? um how many accounts is this person managing? Like those are all really really important to dig into.
Hmm. That's great. What about, so Kelly is asking, can anyone recommend an internal pitch to shop for a new ATS or and leverage AI, looking to improve time to fill this year as most of the recruiting will be tied to proposal activity?
Yeah, all right, this is how much of a nerd I am. So I wrote this like this blog post a while back about like literally this topic, um about like how time to fill is like an insanely impactful way to measure the ROI from a new applicant tracking system. So that's the blog post. But the long and short of it is, I think there's a video somewhere that I can probably find. Um, the long and short of it is that if you think about the value of an employee to a business, it's probably like 1.5x their salary and per day, right? Or per hour, or whatever their unit measurement is. And it's easy to think about this from a salesperson because it's like, all right, we're paying a salesperson 100 grand a year. They bring in $500,000 of sales. Hopefully on a salesperson, you really do want like a 4 or 5x ratio. And therefore you can calculate like the dollar value per day, right? That person brings. And if your time to fill is 30 days and you bring it down to 20, then you're getting that person for an extra 10 days, and therefore you multiply that by their value per day. For roles outside of sales, it's a little bit wonkier, and that's why I think like 1.5x salary or total comp maybe is like a better way to do it in a conservative way. Um, and from an AI recruiting standpoint, you can put this in a spreadsheet and it's like, all right, our time to fill is 40 days. We bring it to 30 days. Here's the ROI, times we're saving this number of days times number of hires per year. It's probably a really big number.
Hmm.
And it's probably a big number even if you go from 40 to 38 days.
Hmm.
And then it's like, all right, what's the story behind it? Well, the story from an AI recruiting standpoint is as opposed to like having somebody do sourcing and screening and back and forth and like all this work that takes us like 2.5 weeks, a computer can do that in like 90 seconds. and we can start getting phone screen scheduled tomorrow, right?
Mhm.
And so, we're cutting out that work, and therefore, our estimated time to fill savings is, let's say, 5 days or whatever the case may be. And if you do that math out, the number will be very, very big.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Looks like Christy's asking for a recommendation for a sourcing solution. Is that something? So you mentioned you're going to be rolling out an AI. Is it AI sourcing and being able to have your advisors
Yeah.
advise on that?
Yep. Um, yeah. So there's a lot of I think I've heard really good things about Gem.
Mhm.
I don't I'm not as intimately familiar with their AI sourcing capabilities, but I think like Gem and then like a ATS that bolts into it natively, like a greenhouse, is probably like a pretty good starting stack, especially if you're at a company that's going to grow really fast and TA is really important. Um, I mean, Humanly is a good one to take a look at. Juicebox is a good one to take a look at. Again, I think the answer probably is like it depends based
Mhm.
on like what you're looking for, what kind of talent you're searching for, what's your recruiting process, etc. But those are definitely a couple of the solutions that I would look at. We do have a full buyer guide on AI sourcing tools or AI recruiting. I'll see if I can pull that up real quick. Yeah, here we go. Um, Actually, no, this isn't it. So maybe I'll follow up with that. But um, yeah, and then our advisors will start helping out with those sorts of questions probably like even next week. And
Okay.
so if you want to talk to them, Christy, I would recommend chatting with them, and I'll drop in the calendar for that right there, the link.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Abby's asking about the importance of ATS and CRM integration. She says, my last two roles stress the importance of that integration, specifically around the biggest CRM out there, Salesforce. Curious if this comes up with other orgs.
Um, I'm guessing, Abby, you work at a big company if you're using Salesforce as your candidate relationship management software, um, versus like a HR specific solution. I think if you're using a CRM, you want them to integrate natively between the ATS and the CRM. I think Kimberly points out something good, which is like she's basically asking like what are the use cases for the CRM, or we don't need one. And I find that a lot of companies unfortunately like don't really use it. Like I think a lot of these solutions are really good, like Beamery or Phenom or whatever, but a lot of teams, they buy them, they implement them, they train people on it. It's just like really hard to change behavior amongst your team members. And if you're not gonna leverage all the bells and whistles, it can just be like a really expensive extra thing versus maybe it's like, hey, the thing that like really is a pain point for us is sourcing or screening or whatever. And maybe we just need like a point solution there that bolts into the ATS.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
But I would say to your original question, like it's extremely important to have it basically a native integration between the
mm-hmm.
two.
Great. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on to some of our other questions, but again, feel free to keep putting questions in the chat if you have them. You talked earlier about the transparency of like the customer support realities of like there might be hidden things in the contract that aren't really apparent in the buying process. Is there anything else to add about other like implementation costs or anything else that might be hidden that people should be aware of?
I think the answer is yes, and it depends on what you're buying. If you're buying like Glassdoor or CPC advertising or something like, it's like, oh, there could just be like overages and there could be extra seat costs and like all these things. And so one thing that I've seen people do that I think could be effective is just put in an email this question, basically like to your sales rep, the quota is X. how would we spend more than X over the lifetime, over the course of this contract? Because that it's one thing to have that conversation and it's like, oh, it never happens or whatever, right? Like it's an easy question to kind of brush off, but um, if you have it in writing, you have it in writing, and you kind of get down to brass tacks.
Hmm. Yeah, great. Thank you. And then what about, we talked about a little bit earlier, the other internal stakeholders or maybe end users. Um, if somebody falls in love with a certain tool that you know isn't the right fit, so how do you navigate that relationship or that process?
So this is basically like somebody on your team comes in, they're like, we use I love iSIMs because I've used it before, but you're like, yeah, this is like the worst ATS for us. It's so hard because people like, it's sort of it's one of these things that I think is interesting in life in general, where like, you know, people irrationally get attached to things, whether they're, politics or people or whatever. And it's just like so hard to have a rational conversation. I think more times than not, when people love one of these tools, it's just because it's comfortable.
Mhm.
And so I think you need to try to get, it's almost like therapy, like get to the root of the issue of like, why do you care? Why are you such a big ISIMS proponent? It's like, oh, because you're afraid of learning gem or whatever. And it's like, all right, like let's, let me give you a quick demo. Let me show you like the cool things it can do, why it's a good fit for us. And by the way, like let's set up a plan where you're going to get supported in learning this new solution. Um, and inevitably they're going to be like, well, it doesn't do like this, and this, like specific things. And it's like, all right, well, let's like figure out a workarounds for those. And of course, you rely on your account management team. You can even rely on something like a ChatGPT these days because it's read all the documentation for every software out there. And um, yeah, just get them as comfortable as possible. But it's basically like just making the pitch and understanding with a lot of empathy why they're coming from where they are.
Hmm. Yeah, that's great advice. Therapy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. How does it make you feel that
Yeah,
we
yeah.
might switch to Gem? Scared. Makes me feel
Yeah.
scared. Yeah.
Exactly. Okay, let's talk about budgeting. That's a big part of this, right? The actual dollars involved. So how do you go about setting a realistic budget for any HR tech investments, especially when you're a smaller team or you just, don't have a big budget to work with in general?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the unfortunately biggest ways that we see people waste time is they do go through like a procurement cycle and they want to buy XYZ solution, and the CFO is like, no. And so you have to figure out like what is the the answer before you do the work, because otherwise you're going to drive yourself crazy, and you're going to be like, CFO doesn't get it, and like here's why we want it, and blah blah blah. And it's like, that's might be true, but like you should have asked prior and like tried to figure out what the answer was and like how much budget there is. And so obviously if you're replacing budget, that's amazing. Figure out like how much are we paying for X, Y, and Z, how much we decrease it by. Um, Building a business case is a great way to articulate the value and that therefore get the budget.
Mhm.
And we've got like a ton of ROI calculators on our site. I'm always happy if anybody, shoots me a note. It's like, hey, Phil, I'm trying to figure out like the question about time to fill. I'm always happy to try to be a resource for that. That will be in our LLM that we're
Mhm.
releasing. Um, but the other piece of advice I always have is find somebody in your company that just kind of thinks in spreadsheet. Maybe they're like on the FP&A team, maybe they have an MBA, whatever the case may be. There are certain people who they just look at a problem and they immediately translate it like into the income statement and like what are the levers that will get us to a dollar value. And if you can buy that person lunch, explain what you're trying to accomplish, like the time to fill thing, and they're putting together a simple spreadsheet for you, and you take it to the CFO and it's like, hey, like here's all the reasons why we need to change our ATS. Like we don't have mobile apply and I can't update the career website, blah, blah, blah. And like this is all the, kind of reasons why it sucks. And we all can agree that like these are valid reasons. But then like here's the the business case and here's the dollar value. And I think we can decrease time to fill by 4 days, and that would translate into XYZ amount of dollars. Or, we don't have to expand the recruiting team by 20% next year. We can expand it by 15% because of efficiency. We already have $20,000 of budget that we're spending on like these two tools that we can get rid of. I need another 20,000 to buy the system that I want. Is that cool with you? And if so, okay, I'm going to go do some work. I'm going to do our diligence, make sure we buy the right solution now. I'm going to come back to you in 6 weeks and give you my final analysis.
Mhm.
Would be my recommendation
Mhm.
in a perfect world.
Yeah, I think you point out a good point, which is, speak the language of the person you're trying to trying to get convinced of this thing, right? If CFO or the person in finance is going to be thinking in spreadsheets, and so even if that's not you yourself, and a lot of recruiters or HR people aren't minded like that, so finding a friend and finding somebody else you can align with that would really help you with your initiative, I think is a great piece of advice.
Yeah.
um,
And by the way, you asked this question earlier about like staying organized, and I actually found these slides that Frida had put together um about this, like to just showcase, because I talked about this spreadsheet and it can be like somewhat abstract. Um, but basically, let me just blow this up for a sec. On the left side here, like you're gonna want all your must-have features, your nice-to-have features, and then you're gonna have the vendor. So, it's Greenhouse, it's Lever, it's Rippling, it's whatever. And then, yes, they have it now, or, maybe it's on the roadmap, whatever. And then any additional context. I also put in the spreadsheet the pricing and then likability. Um, and oh, you can download the template, just scan this QR code and you can download the template, which is nice. Thank you, Frida, for putting these slides together. Um, Salesperson likability, I think like the best salespeople can work anywhere. They work at good companies with good products because that allows them to hit their number and make a lot of money. And so if your salesperson's like organized and knows the industry, they're there for a reason, and that's a good signal. And then pricing, again, what I would recommend you do is, you black out all these notes, and you send it to Bamboo, and you're like, hey, Bamboo, like, did I get, are my notes correct, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, oh, wow, they're talking to Greenhouse, they're talking to Rippling, they're talking to whoever. Geez, I should really put my best foot forward. So this is kind of what I was talking about. And then for the folks that are, they're looking for a little bit of extra help, another QR code here. The HR software advisors that we have at SSR are very, very good. They're rated 4.9 stars. It's a free service. You're looking at HRIS, ATS. We're gonna have AI recruiting here probably next week. So, feel free to ping them about AI recruiting questions, payroll, etc. You call them up, you talk to them for 15, 20 minutes. They'll figure out what you should be looking at. It's rated 4.9 stars, and we do have this $50 gift card thing going on for the Town Collective community. So if you are in the market, I highly recommend, scan the QR code. I'll put another link in the chat and leverage them like, MIT and the Colts and like all these other organizations have done. So yeah, hopefully those resources are useful.
Yeah, super useful. Thank you. Yeah, it's always good to see a visual. So thanks for showing that. And you have so many great resources on your website too, and blog stuff. So we'll send out some links to all of that when we send the follow up from this. I'd love to ask one more question since I don't see any others in the chat. But so looking ahead at the future, what do you think that HR and TA leaders should be doing to future proof their tech stack for the next wave of innovation? Would love to start there.
There's the link. It's a great question. There's no way, there is no future proof, unfortunately. Like the world is changing at an accelerated rate. Like, that it was like the internet, and then like 20 years later, mobile. And like, you know what I mean? And now it's like every 6 months, it's like you can create videos with a prompt that look
Mhm.
like professional grade videos. Like it's just crazy. And so my recommendation is to not get too caught up in the hype and this company's doing this amazingly and like you see so many things on LinkedIn or wherever you consume your media and it kind of like it's almost designed to make you feel like bad about like the stuff you're doing and the reality is because we talk to so many HR and TA people every single month and I think if you have a good tech stack, meaning you have a really good applicant tracking system, HRIS, maybe you have one or two point solutions, and you're actually utilizing those solutions, you're in the 90th percentile. Because we
Mhm.
see so many teams that like they might have like an awesome HRIS that like they don't know how to use. And they
Mhm.
have to pay a third party consultant that comes in and is like, oh my gosh, like, you guys are looking at buying an employee engagement tool. This has employee engagement.
Yeah.
um you're looking at this like there's a lot of mistakes and it's because we're all busy and I totally understand it and empathize with it and I'm not criticizing anybody, but I think that I wouldn't worry so much about like, future proofing us for the future next 10 years or whatever because it's impossible because the technology is changing so quickly, which is good for us because it means, we have a business, people are going to keep coming to us for advice because it's hard for us even to stay on top of everything. But I would just, get a good tech stack, best in class solutions, make sure you're utilizing them, and then just have an open mind, be on the hunt. Maybe subscribe to a newsletter, go to sessions like this, talk to people, what are you using, and just have your radar out there for the next thing that might be useful for you and your team.
Mhm. I'm so glad you brought up that piece about utilizing the tools you do have to the fullest extent. That was a huge learning opportunity for me where it was like using the CSM that you have access to, right? Like hopping on a call with them quarterly. They usually offer
Yeah.
that as a service. But then also webinars that the company's putting out, usually with feature releases, they might do a webinar or something like that. And I personally fall into the trap of I'm too busy, but then you end up not utilizing the tools you have and then falling down this trap of potentially, wanting to change and then you're going to spend a lot more time changing and like going through all these demos than actually trying to utilize what you do have. So looks like Paul had some questions on podcasts, newsletters.
Yep.
um
Yeah, I mean, I'll totally give a plug for our newsletter because I think it's really good. Like a guy actually recognized me on an airplane not too long ago, and he's like, "I read your newsletter," and I forward his daughter is also like the head of HR for the Red Sox, which I'm in Boston. He's like showing me on his phone. He's like, "I forward every single one of these to my daughter," um, and it's really it has a huge following and all this stuff. I think I Hate It Here is really good. Um, I think HR Brew is decent. The Morning Brew product. Um, Human Times is like, a daily newsletter that's like usually like an interesting headline or something like that. Um, that's all that's coming to my mind right now.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Phil. Well, we're about to wrap up here. So just want to first of all thank everyone for attending. So glad that you came here to learn more today and really hope you all are gonna go out and book a session with SSR. Again, I've done it. It was super helpful and gave me a great starting point for what I needed when I was vetting a new ATS. We will send out a follow up. I'll include Phil's LinkedIn. Please connect with him. Feel free to connect with me as well, especially if you're interested in learning more about Talent Collective. On that note, we have a couple more events coming up through end of year. We're kind of starting to trickle down as the year comes to a close, but our next one is going to be about deep fake candidates. So if you're struggling with that or having that as an issue, join us and join that one. So thank you again, everyone. Thanks, Phil, and thanks, Select Software Reviews, for being here with us today. We'll see y'all soon.
Thanks, everybody.